everybody, thank you for joining us again for another segment of Discussions with DeSaulnier. I'm Congressman Mark DeSaulnier. I have the privilege of representing most of Contra Costa County and a part of Alameda County in the United States House of Representatives. I'm one of 435 House members, and it's really a privilege and an honor. It's a difficult time right now with difficult issues, and that's why we want to spend time with people here in the East Bay who are doing work on national problems and making a difference. And frequently, people don't realize how important the Bay Area is and the East Bay and our nonprofits and our government agencies and the work they do on national issues. Right now, we're going to talk in this discussion about food insecurity. It's hard to believe that in the richest country in the history of human development, that 47 million Americans are food insecure. They don't get enough food every day. 1 in 5 American children are in that category. So in spite of our abundance, we're not getting enough food, and particularly nutritious food, food that doctors and the medical research shows we need. And again, particularly for kids, as a senior member of the Education Committee who spent a lot of time on this, as we're developing physically and cognitively and emotionally, it's really important. So we've done a lot of good work here in Contra Costa, and my guest today is part of a multi-generational effort here in Contra Costa, Caitlin Sly from the Contra Costa Solano Food Bank. So we've been involved for a long time. Multi-generational was I worked with your dad, Larry, who, when I was in local government, trying to get the funding so we could get the program up. But tell the audience a little bit about how you got here and the work that you do and the challenge you face right here at home.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. The food bank is celebrating 50 years this year, which is pretty amazing. And we started very humbly, with a trailer parked in Martinez, picking up day-old bread. And as you mentioned, my dad, Larry Sly, was employee number 2, driving a pickup truck. And now we're a huge organization that has a fleet of trucks, serves enough food for 2.7 million meals every single month. And it's, as you mentioned, it's really sad that we are still having to do this work and that food insecurity is growing. But me personally, I was fortunate enough to be voluntold when I was younger to get involved with the food bank, and then had the privilege of actually working for the food bank, started as a temp, and have worked my way up to be in this role. So it's a privilege to be able to do this work. And unfortunate that we still have to, and that there are still seniors and veterans and children going hungry every day.
So talk about your clients. One of the challenges we have, particularly right now in this country, is misinformation, and people have a tendency to think those people, we always have, somehow they're not deserving or they should feed themselves somehow. It's important for people to realize that people struggle every day. And a lot of our neighbors and brothers and sisters are struggling, even in what traditionally, again, stereotypically people think is a community that's thriving. And of course, the Dickens type aspect of this country right now with the concentration of wealth from historical standards is the worst it's ever been. So here in one of the wealthiest regions in the wealthiest country in the world and state, we still struggle. Who are the clients you see?
We see everyone from working families to seniors on fixed incomes to, like I mentioned, veterans, people with disabilities. It's really, there is such a tendency to think about it's them over there in that neighborhood. And the truth is, there are neighbors. Often people don't know that the person 2 houses down is coming to one of our distributions. And that could be because they're just got laid off. It could be for a temporary period of time. And they're just trying to make ends meet. And with the cost of living, especially here in the Bay Area, between housing and energy and food prices, it all adds up, and folks just are trying to make ends meet. We also have a lot of older adults. We have, it brings to mind one couple that lives in Richmond that relies on both the SNAP program and our food bank services, our senior food program, to be able to make ends meet. And everything's going along swimmingly, and then their roof had a problem and they had to get a roof repair, and just one bill like that can send you into a tailspin if you're living paycheck to paycheck. So it really is people just like you and me that have fallen on a hard time.
And this is something that's really important for people to understand. This inequality that the Congress has enabled because we've changed our tax structure, putting more money into very wealthy people, trickle down doesn't work. People tend to, we know from the research, people concentrated. But it's not just your income, it's your purchasing power. So we've all got housing costs, and it's different depending on what your gross income is. But what's really changed is your income hasn't gone up with the productivity in the United States and with the economy. It's both, a lot of that traditionally that got spread in the 50s and 60s now goes if you have big capital investments, if you've got investments. So your housing costs have gone up, your healthcare costs have gone up, your education costs have gone up, your transportation cost, and the fifth fixed cost is taxes, which is the only thing that hasn't gone up relative to the other four things. So when you're done paying everything you had to at the beginning of the month, that's what you have left over for food.
Yep.
So people have to make these decisions based on your roof needs a repair, your car needs a repair. There's no place to take that from. You don't have the savings. And that's the real world impact. We did a national tour that included Contra Costa with my very dear friend Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, and this is a big thing for him. The ranking member and chair of the Rules Committee, brilliant colleague, who just was in a town hall at Acalanes. Yeah. We went around the country looking at this, and it was a lot of food banks. Mm-hmm. And it was funny, when we were going to different places, all the food banks were sharing information with the other members about, well, they're good. But this is the thing that's so interesting on a national issue like this, and how we respond here, and how you just describing your dad starting as 2 employees in the organization now. The good news is we've got more people engaged. Talk about your volunteers and where your funding comes from.
So we have over 7,000 volunteers.
Isn't that wonderful?
I mean, I always say this, I sound like a broken record, but we literally would not operate for one day without our volunteers. So we have volunteer groups that we're passing out food today, that we're sorting food today, that come in to answer our phones. They do everything. And it is so important for people to get engaged there's a million different ways for them to do that. So it's really important for the community. And as you mentioned, it is everywhere. I mean, we really do see food insecurity in every neighborhood. In fact, it's interesting. We're working currently on a mapping project where we do data gap analysis and look at where are services and where is the need. And we're doing that in partnership with other food insecurity organizations in the community. And a couple of neighborhoods where there was a gap was San Ramon, was Moraga, was, areas that aren't typically thought of as low income. Right. But you have, for example, a senior who owns their house, but their income hasn't gone up, and the other costs of living, you can't not pay PG&E. Right. But you can cut food. Yeah. And so we just don't believe that anyone should have to be making those kinds of choices in this day and age.
It's funny, having gone out with Meals on Wheels, the volunteer part, we were real lucky mm-hmm. because we've got lots of people who are able to volunteer. Mm-hmm. Some of your volunteers, they cross, again, like your clients and the challenges, but that is inspiring that we've got people, and you've been able to do this in your organization. And when people ask, what can we do? This is a perfect example.
Yes, they can come to our warehouse and sort food. They can go out to one of our distribution sites. We have volunteer ambassadors that get trained to go out to health fairs and do things like that to speak on behalf of the food banks. So it is really important. And we have advocacy volunteers right. who can get support to write letters to their congressperson. You've probably gotten several of them.
So we welcome them.
Yes, I know you do, because you're a great partner. And we train folks on how to share their story, because I think also there's a stigma to having to go and ask for food or having that in your past. It's not something people want to talk about, but it's really important for folks to share their connection, to make people realize that it isn't those people over there, that it really can happen to anyone.
Well, and an anecdotal story, my dear Boston Irish mother who lived in Marin, I'd go over to visit her, and she had some food, and one of my brothers and I helped her with her, because she didn't have any money. My dad had gone bankrupt years ago, and we had to fend for ourselves. Fortunately, we had all had good educations, but I went over to see Mom, and she was in a Mercy housing project, because one of my brothers worked for the Archdiocese. It was lovely. But I go in, what's this in the refrigerator? Oh, I love that. Just don't pay any attention to that. And I'm like, well, where'd you get it? And she goes, well, I got it from Meals on Wheels. And the stigma part, she didn't want me to know, even though they were outreach in the senior housing project, that it was all welcome. And it also gave them something else, as we learn when we go out on those ride-alongs. It's a human connection, which goes to your volunteers, and how important that is. You've got the stigma, but then you've got people coming out and saying, don't worry about it. We all could be, it's very biblical, walk a mile in my shoes.
Absolutely. I mean, we have the same people coming to us. In fact, we had a distribution today in El Sobrante, and I was just talking to one of my staff members that said, oh, one of our volunteers that was there was a former board member from like decades ago. And so they know all of the people that come by name. And so it's really important for us to ensure that there's a dignified experience when people are coming to get food. And that we do that by knowing people by name, and by letting people choose. More and more we're offering choice when people come to our food distributions, so that it's not just, here's a bag of food, but what do you want? And is this meeting the cultural and nutritional needs for your family?
Yeah, and that's a nice balance. I mean, it's not, some people who criticize programs and the government's involvement with the programs is being like it's a luxury spa. It's a balance, that we've got human connection with respect, but it's still a challenge, and it's not what people aspire to. People don't want to be in this situation. They want to be able to work hard and with dignity and be able to shop where they want to. But the importance of the balance, I think, that your organization and so many in our community do is really, it's not just about the food, it's about the connection of the community, but of course the food. You mentioned more about how you get funded. So I want to talk about SNAP and what we and I fought so hard against, and what the Congress and the President just did to SNAP. So this is a very successful program. It historically has been bipartisan, because the research shows you get this product out to people and they get to a point where they can take care of themselves. So speak a little bit about the pressure on your funding. You've got these volunteers, but you still have to get funding. And the sort of the bipartisan part of this, as you go back to George W. Bush, I didn't agree with it, but the idea that compassionate conservatism is you could get faith-based communities and nonprofits, which the United States has had a historic, wonderful, and very effective relationship. But it still it requires a commitment from all of us through the government to invest in it and invest wisely. So it's not a giveaway, it's an investment that shows in SNAP that it was successful, and doing away with it is going to cost the taxpayers more money, in my view. And my argument with my Republican colleagues is, the reason we established this program and had oversight was because it was a good return on investment. And now undoing it, how are they going to survive? So talk a little bit about the impacts on SNAP. It's a 20% reduction over 10 years, which basically makes the whole program collapse. And my Republican colleagues, you really think that there are inefficiencies and waste up to 20%? I'm all for getting rid of the inefficiencies, but in this program, it's been studied to death, and it was really good outcomes, including return on investment and efficiencies. Can you speak to your personal experience and what will happen with those kind of cuts if they continue as they've currently legislated?
Well, when this goes into effect, these cuts, it's going to be catastrophic. I mean, full stop. What is currently in this past legislation will result in, it's estimated, a 6 billion meal gap, a 6 billion meal cut nationwide. That is the same as our entire network of food banks nationwide, of pantries, of soup kitchens. And so we would have to essentially double our service to meet that gap. There's no food bank in the world that can do that. And so what we're looking at is going to be tens of thousands of people in our local community that are going to be without that food assistance on SNAP benefits, which is the most efficient way of getting food to people in need, because it's going to the grocery store.
Right.
Just like you and I go to the grocery store, it's the most dignified way and it's the most efficient. We are incredibly efficient at distributing food. For every dollar that's donated to the food bank, we can distribute enough food for 2 meals. But for every meal that we distribute, SNAP can distribute 9. So we know that grocery stores are the most efficient way of getting food to people in this nation. And so why we don't invest in that, or taking funding away from that, is going to have a catastrophic effect, not just on individuals in need, but on grocers and on farmers and on food producers and on jobs. It is an economic driver. These are federal funds that come into our local community and support the whole food system. And so I think by focusing on, we think there's waste, fraud, and abuse, so we're going to slash this program. There are ramifications that we're not taking into account. And so that is really going to have an impact. So right now, we're just trying to figure out, how do we prepare to serve thousands of more people with fewer resources? While we don't receive the majority of our budget from the federal government, we do get some federal, state, local funding, and that makes up about a quarter of our budget. The large majority of what we get is from individuals like you and me, which, thank goodness, we live in a very generous community that is able to provide, folks sending in a $20 check, a $100 check here and there. It all adds up, and that is the majority. And then we have foundations and corporate partners that make up a lot of it. But there is some government funding, and we've already seen some cuts. We had an EPA grant for food rescue that was cut. We had a local food purchasing agreement, the LFPA grant, that was supposed to be renewed and was not renewed. And so that is funding for local farmers that we no longer are going to have. And so all of those things those federal funding cuts are coming at the same time when people are going to be losing their purchasing power through cuts to SNAP. And so it is going to come to a head where we have a community that's less healthy, less nourished, and is going to be making more of those decisions of, do I pay for my medicine or do I buy food?
Well, the funding thing I think is interesting because, again, you don't get that much federal, but you rely on people donating. And I love the fact that we in this community, there's lots of small donations, but losing the SNAP part creates more demand for you. When there isn't the resources to fill that. So there is this sort of thought, first of all, that somebody else in the private sector will fund nonprofits, and second of all, that there's this elaborate waste, fraud, and abuse. Why? This has been my arguments, having spent 8 years on the Oversight Committee and a lot of time in government as a former Republican who still thinks about, as a Republican small business owner, I wanted the taxes to be used efficiently. It wasn't more or less. If it's a good return on investment, invest in it for the whole community. why not identify the waste? Now, you and I, having been in the restaurant business, thin margin, and dealing with food, there's not a lot of waste in your organization. And I couldn't afford waste. I think we did some things where we had a program where restaurants were trying to supply fresh food that was going to waste, and it's really hard to do that because you've got to get it when you're serving high quality, nutritious food. I'm not talking about expensive. We all know how long an apple lasts. You can't just, so talk to me about the years of making sure that there isn't a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, let alone just the waste part. You use everything.
We use everything. I mean, and as you mentioned before, SNAP has been studied to death, and I think it's about 1%.
Right.
So that is so small and less than most other programs, federally funded programs. But we also look at the whole food system. I mean, this is how we got started, is by reducing food waste,
Right.
is by picking up day-old bread.
In California in particular.
Yes, in California in particular, over half of what we distribute is fresh produce. And that is farms, it's too big or too small to be sold in a grocery store. So just yesterday we were bagging some pears, and we had some tiny pears and we had some big pears.
You're bringing back memories of being in my kitchen.
Perfectly
with
good
purveyors.
pears.
Yeah.
So we are able to get those donations from farmers and distribute that out. We go to grocery stores still to this day and pick up what's nearing code date and is still perfectly healthy and fresh, and we're able to get that and turn it around within a couple days. It is so important that we're reducing food waste, and that has a positive impact on our environment. Mm-hmm. It reduces stuff going into the landfill, and it also gets really nutritious, fresh
Right.
food to the people that need it. So we are doing everything and have always done everything that we can to reduce waste, and that's what feeds people in need.
So we'll transition a little bit to kids. Yes. So another big target by my Republican colleagues is lunches and free and reduced lunches. In California, we've been spectacular at this. I was saying earlier, schools in Contra Costa County actually get this really nutritious farm fresh. They're helping local farmers. They're eating the kids. It's helping the kids be healthier, cognitive development. We know the best way to stop obesity is make sure kids start off knowing what they're eating and what's good for them, and developing a palate, this is from my restaurant experience, that enjoys it. And we know what Food Inc., as it's called, used to do is they create large corporations, create a lot of calories that wasn't very flavorful but was addictive. And particularly here in California, where most people don't realize a third of all the fruits and vegetables in the United States are produced here in California in the Valley. So reducing, in California we expanded it to everybody could get this wonderful lunch at school. When I was in the legislature, I led a bicameral, bipartisan effort to look at the research around what students lose when they're in the summertime cognitively, both learning loss, but also what was really shocking, but I should have known it being in the food industry, of what kids learn when they're eating McDonald's and not eating this wonderful food that, again, is a great return on investment for taxpayers. So when you look at the full gamut of what is under attack here, starting with what we give kids in Head Start, and we do a great job here in Contra Costa. They get great education, they get volunteers, great return on investment, and they get great food all the way through the school system. I just had a meeting with the superintendents. This ongoing attack on what we've done in California in particular, where we have after-school programs where they get great school, could you speak a little bit about that in your experiences? Having kids experience great food that's helped by government investment, nonprofits, but then it helps with the whole food chain.
Absolutely. Well,
and public health.
Yes, it is a health issue. It's a health and learning issue, because we really see what we do at the food bank by providing fresh, healthy food, and the same is done through the school meal program and through SNAP and through all of these programs that work together. It's preventative health care.
Right.
These are setting folks up to eat healthy, keeps them out of the emergency room, keeps them able to take their medications and adhere to what their doctor tells them to do. It also sets them up to learn. It sets kids, if, like you mentioned, from Head Start to college. I mean, we have pantries on college campuses. And it's really, you can't study on an empty stomach. When I'm hungry, there's no way I'm concentrating on my work. And we see that every day. I was really, what got me passionate when I first started as a temp was working with kids. And so one of my first real jobs in the food bank was working at with our Farm to Kids program and going directly to schools, which that program still exists and still serves tons of schools throughout Contra Costa and Solano counties. And that's where we provide fresh produce to low-income schools.
Right.
And every time I would visit a school, they would say, our kids rely on school meals. They eat the breakfast, the lunch, and the after-school program supper, and that's the only meal they get all day, or what they get in schools. Right. And then they take home the fresh produce that you give to take to their families. And so we know that we hear every day that kids are able to show up to school and to concentrate on their homework and pay attention because they're getting fed. And any cuts to those programs, any loss of food, will have impacts on children's learning and development and their ability to be engaged. And it's an investment in our future generation.
Right.
So we're really, we've got to keep investing in the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs.
One of the Humpty Dumpty aspects of this is it took a long time to change this. Great book called Food Inc. about how industry created these addictive, often, or at least behaviorally addictive. And when I was a county supervisor, I got an ordinance passed. You couldn't have advertising within a half mile of a school, billboard advertising, because the research showed they had spent the money on busy moms and dads. We take them to a fast food restaurant. And then in the legislature, Alex Padilla and I, when we were both there, passed the first menu labeling law. And God, McDonald's, they all hated it. Well, they knew that particularly the moms, if they read the nutritional as they drove through, they'd say, hey, maybe I shouldn't give that. And it's hurt their bottom line, but it's helped the public. As you said, people aren't going into the emergency room. So this investment is the point, I guess, I'm getting at, that keeps coming up in this. If people are critical of programs like SNAP or free and reduced lunch programs, it's a really misinformed, because it saves so much money. And it helps for better, more vibrant, productive workers, correct?
Absolutely, and it makes the healthy choice the easy choice, right? Because if I'm working 2-3 jobs and I'm just trying to feed my kids and make sure that the bills are paid and that the house is clean and everybody's happy, I'm gonna do what's easiest. And so and what I can afford. And so by giving folks fresh, healthy fruits and vegetables, lean protein, and by giving them SNAP benefits to stretch their dollar, you make the healthy choice the easy choice, and then you're able to have good health outcomes for the rest of their lives.
Well, that's what I said to the McDonald's and the fast food people, and they were so mad at me. I said, well, you could change the menu. And
which they did.
They did. It wasn't as profitable or sustainable in terms of addicting people to certain types of food. So what do you see the next few months and years look like for you, and where can we help?
Well, I think that we're preparing for the worst. And we know these cuts are coming down. There are certain cuts, there will be more people coming to us because of SNAP cuts in the next few months, and then the next few years, as there is a timeline for the implementation of various different types of cuts. So we're preparing for the next couple of years of being pretty dire, looking how we can do more with less at the food bank, and looking at how we can call on our community to help support us. So I think for the community, if they can donate and they can volunteer and they can speak out and raise awareness about how important SNAP is, and for folks like you to keep fighting the good fight at the federal level for policies that can invest in local farms, in local food banks, in the charitable food system, and protecting SNAP as much as possible, because it is really the first line of defense against hunger in our community.
Well, that was perfect. Thank you so much. We've got to defend what we've got here and work together, which is what this is part of, why we continue to advocate nationally to reinvest in good investments. Caitlin, thank you so much for the work you do, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.